Most Christians know by now that digital currency is a crucial step toward the mark of the beast, and the only way the elites are going to be able to control whether you can truly buy or sell is with something like digital currency that controls every transaction. But most don't know that digital currency is programmable, and the global elites can decide what products you can buy and which ones you can't, giving certain companies and products an insurmountable edge in the marketplace. Like your local coffee shop. Do you like it more than Starbucks? Well, someday soon, your digital money might not work in that local shop and only in Starbucks. Like to tithe at your church? Maybe your digital money won't work there. This is Last Day's Breaking News with Nelson Walters, and we're talking about the precursors to the mark of the beast right now. From the very moment Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies emerged on the world market, the central banks of this world knew they had to eliminate those cryptocurrencies since they are independent and an alternative medium of exchange outside of the bank's tightly controlled financial status quo. Banks could never allow an independent form of financial exchange because that would remove their control on the economy. Banks knew they would either have to buy out Bitcoin or provide their own substitute. The central banks decided to produce their own digital currencies to replace the current dollar, euro, yen, etc., rather than buy out Bitcoin immediately, although they will likely do that in the long term at some point. Digital currency will remove all remaining privacy that we have in our financial transactions. The USA's request for monitoring of transactions of over $600 is just the first step in this move to digital control of your money. Governments lie that they are only interested in increasing taxes on the rich. If that is true, why are they examining $600 purchases? Things like TVs, washing machines, used cars, my goodness. They'll even know if you bleached your teeth. This affects everyone, not just the rich. The $600 monitoring limit is to get you prepared and used to what is going to come. However, with a digital currency, this monitoring will become automatic. As credits shift from account to account, a permanent record of everything you purchase or earn will be recorded. If your son cuts the grass in the neighborhood for $10, the government will know. If you tithe at your church, as we said, the government will not only know, it might consider preventing that transaction. If you wonder why there was a coin shortage this year, well, that's why. There really wasn't a shortage as we know it. It was a means of controlling the use of cash in order to move to an all-digital transaction, which is coming much sooner than anyone believes possible. We'll get to when it's coming later in this video. And not only will digital currency remove all privacy of transactions, it will take the total control over every transaction, even limiting what ordinary people are allowed to spend their money on. Bet you didn't realize that was coming, but it is. Digital currency can be programmed by the banks to allow transactions only in businesses that meet their corporate philosophy. Churches like mine have long been prepared to lose their 501(c) status. We kind of knew that was coming, and we've seen it as inevitable. But digital currency gives the governments and the banks control and gives them power to totally shut off certain accounts. In a digital world, there won't be a plate to pass because there won't be any cash. And if the government doesn't like your theology at church, they might just cut off your income. What should churches and ministries do about this right now? We're going to discuss that in a moment as well. But first, a shout out to a member of our advisory board, Fisherman, for providing us with the information for this video. Now, central bank digital currencies are exactly what they sound like. Digitized versions of the pound, dollar, euro, etc. that we all use now and that are issued by central banks. The countries where this idea has progressed the farthest are China and the UK. The Chinese digital yuan has been in development since 2014 and is subject to ongoing and widespread testing. They're just about ready to roll it out. Just like social credit scores, China is out in front on this development because they have totalitarian control. They can do what they want. Democracies have to be a little more coy, so the UK is nowhere near at that stage yet. But Chancellor Rishi Sunak has keenly been pushing forward a digital pound that the press is calling Britcoin. Not Bitcoin, but Britcoin. Other countries where a lot of our community lives, places like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Malaysia, are not that far behind. As we reported before, the U.S. is also researching the idea. Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve, said he will be releasing a detailed report on the digital dollar either this year or the beginning of next year. The proposals for how these CBDCs might work should be enough to raise a red flag in even the most trusting of minds. Christians who read their Bibles realize that the control function of the mark of the beast will require a digital currency to provide the lockdown of buying and selling that, of course, the mark of the beast requires. The most dangerous short-term idea, however, is that any future digital currency will be programmable, meaning the bank issuing the money would have the power to control how it is spent. That's not a conspiracy theory. Here's a quote from Augustin Carstens, head of the International Settlement Bank, from earlier this year. Quote, "The key difference with a CBDC is that central bank would have absolute control on the rules and regulations that determine the use of that, quote, expression of central bank liability, and would have the technology to enforce that," end of quote. So obviously they want power. Also notice that phrase, expression of central bank liability. They consider your money to be their money. This is the elimination of private ownership. In other words, they believe they are loaning you every dollar, pound, and yen that you earn and possess. And they think they own it, not you. They believe they have the right to control how you spend it. Initially, this will likely involve social activities. Tom Mutton, director of the Bank of England, said this, quote, "You could introduce programmability. There could be some socially beneficial outcomes from that, preventing activity which is seen as socially harmful in some way," end of quote. What would socially harmful activities be in the eyes of central banks? Probably anything politically incorrect, for one. Might they begin to shut off funds to local pregnancy centers? Would they shut off funds to political candidates that don't follow their globalist agendas? And of course, they will eventually shut off funding for missionaries and the gospel. But initially, this tyranny may be unofficial. At first, the democracies may make a big show of not programming the money, thereby contrasting themselves with China, who most certainly will. But at the same time, they will allow large companies to program for them and program the wages that those companies issue. For instance, McDonald's will very likely make it impossible to spend their employee wages at Burger King. And vice versa. Coke and Pepsi, same thing. No spending on competitors. Then it will move to social issues. Everyone is aware we're living in a time of cancel culture, identity politics, and virtue signaling. Imagine how programmable digital currency fits into that. Your employer could enforce a policy of combating hate by stopping their employees from donating money to those on a blacklist, certain political parties, churches, charities, or individuals. Think about that and where it would lead. This channel not only sees that as possible, but probable, very likely that we will see that in the very near future. And we've seen social media companies take down certain channels for topics related to the pandemic. But imagine a world where companies could renounce those who spread, quote, misinformation, making it impossible for their employees to spend their wages on certain items like music, books, or movies. Imagine the government making wages undependable for anyone who criticizes the party in power. You know, PayPal is already doing this. They are partnering with the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, to limit funding of what they term extremist and hate movements. The ADL is a progressive organization that targets what they define as white supremacist, racist, and anti-government organization. So PayPal's restrictive move is political in nature. And that's what we expect is going to happen to all money. Also, imagine the influence the green movement might have on paychecks. Limits could be placed on how much money you can spend on gasoline, plastic, or meat. Limits could be placed on how much electricity you could buy, or how much heating oil you could use to heat your home or apartment. Only X dollars on airplane flights per year, only Y dollars on dollars for beef per month. And of course, your entire digital bank account could be temporarily shut off or even permanently closed if you misbehave according to the global elite's definitions. Remember, the banks consider all money to be their money, not yours. Digital currencies are the ultimate fascist tool for controlling the population. Control the money, and you control the people. But control of things like politics, the economy, and the ecology are only the first steps, of course. Control of our faith is the ultimate endgame of digital currencies. The politics and economic controls are just to get people used to what will follow. And that is the mark of the beast. Forced worship of the beast in order to control buying and selling. The answer to combating the digital economy is an underground economy and underground churches. Barter is the oldest form of economy in the world, and Christians are going to be forced to return to it in the end times. Manual labor, carpentry, sewing, cooking, whatever skills you have, begin to think what services you could trade for food. Begin to cultivate land to grow your own crops, and begin to acquire items that will be valuable to trade for food in the future. And of course, put away as much food as possible to feed your family and your house church. Now, you may be thinking, hey, I don't have a house church right now. But right now is the time to form one. If you are a pastor, it is probably time to organize your church into small groups or cell groups if you haven't already done so, ones that can become a network of underground house churches when it becomes necessary, because it's going to if you read your Bible. There was never a better time than now to create this type of organization. Begin to think how they will communicate with one another in a time when digital communication is completely controlled centrally. Begin training the leaders to teach and exhort the flock during the most difficult time in history, because it's coming. If you have prided yourself on being a pastor of a big church, begin to think differently. Instead, begin to think about being the pastor of a church that survives and impacts those around them, because the end times will be incredibly stressful for everyone, and non-Christians are going to need the love and support of Jesus expressed to them by your congregation. Begin training them to do this, because time is short. How short? How soon will this happen? Well, believe it or not, most estimates are that the G20 nations, of which most of our community are part, will all be digital in 3 years. Yes, 3 years. You don't hear that on the TV. You don't even see that on the internet, but that's the estimate of the central banks, and it could be sooner. This is an urgent plea then to begin preparing for what is coming. But what about the mark of the beast? I mean, we've been talking that But what about the mark of the beast? We've been talking about it throughout this video. I'm sure you're thinking what we're describing sounds like the mark, and maybe it could be here very soon as well. How will someone know, however, how to identify the true mark when it arrives? Well, click right here to keep watching and learn that there are about a half a dozen clear signs of what the true mark is, and that the real mark has all of these signs. If even one is missing, it isn't the real mark of the beast. It's just a precursor. Till then, this is Nelson. I think that's important information, and I will see you there.